All right, good afternoon, welcome to this day on AYV Television, channel 33, and on the radio on 11.6 FM. On our Facebook page, the Africa Young Voices Media Empire. There you shall drop your comments and be part of the program. Many thanks to Naomi Kamara for bringing you news brief, this afternoon. The show continue in our main studio here at Westland Street in Freetown. In today's conversation, we shall be discussing Sierra Leone's mining sector. As we all know, it's a big contributor to the domestically mobilized revenues in the country. These sectors accounted for an average of 12.658 of GDP between 2014 and 2017, and it's estimated to account for about 90% of export revenues annually. Despite its contribution, yet the sector is faced with numerous challenges, especially least financial flows, which causes resources leakage, reduced tax collections, reduced foreign investment, limit government spending, and consequently, increasing on poverty. In today's program, we'll be looking at the impact of such and activity on the country's economy. In the studio to discuss this, I have been joined by Ben, is it Bankole? Ben Boache. Sorry for pronouncing the name wrongly, and is the Executive Director for African Center for Energy Policy, and Cecilia Mate, and she's the coordinator for NEC, and also I have with me Tio Adoko, and he's a policy lead, mining mineral policy as well. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, for being part of the show. So I'm going to start off with you, Ben, and so let's look at the significance of this, more especially lead to the conference with regards of addressing these issues, more especially in Africa.
Yeah, thanks for having me and my team. Good to be here.
Yeah.
The natural resource sector for many African countries is quite important. Important for generating much of our revenues that we use for development. For so long, it became known that not much is actually received in terms of revenue. So the international community supported by ensuring that there is much transparency around payments to states by introducing the EITI concept, which many countries have adopted and implementing. Sierra Leone is one of the countries that are doing well in terms of following the EITI precepts and principles. So over time we're seeing greater transparency around revenue contribution to state. Countries like Ghana, Sierra Leone, Liberia, in the past it was difficult for companies to even declare profit. They kept micromanaging the process and ensuring that they declared losses rather than profit. But because of transparency, we're increasingly seeing more revenue coming through corporate taxes. But a lot still remains in terms of tracking and optimizing the space and ensuring that the interests of the state can actually be exacted from the extraction of the resources. One of the major challenges we have had over the period is illicit flows, where we're not able to track to a greater extent how much really is due the state because of transfer mispricing and movement of funds through illicit means. So part of the conversation has been, how do we amplify that process of EITI that is generating much transparency in the space to also account for all the revenue and money that leaves our space through the extractive sector. So we are exploring ways to work around this together, looking at the role of civil society, the role of the EITI Secretariat itself, the role of people who have been through this movement and processes to actually ensure that we can move a step beyond where we are reconciling and looking at numbers that are thrown at us by the companies to really understanding the business of extraction how much cost is declared, and how those costs really come about. Who are the participants in this space? How does the state authorities, the revenue authorities, acquire the requisite capacity to be able to monitor the interest of the state, to actually be sure that what is due these countries, resource-dependent countries, are actually gotten. So that is really the importance of the work that we are doing, trying to really go beyond what the company says, go beyond what the state says, to actually looking at the institutions across the value chain to ensure that we can really benefit much more greatly from the extractive sector.
Okay. So let me come over to Cecilia, and from your point, let's narrow it down a bit to Sierra Leone, and because over the years there has been this challenge with regards of monitoring, more especially the mining sector, and most often we have seen CSOs have raised concern of those who are supposed to benefit from these mining sector. They have not been, and the area of monitoring also is a challenge. What has been the problem there, and how can we able to rectify in terms of getting things to be fixed properly?
Thanks very much, Remy. My two colleagues here are from Ghana. They work in the civil society space in Ghana, and over time they have done a lot of work on mining oil and gas. So it's no strange that they are here today to help us all think about, have a regional thinking, and then for them to understand what's happening in Sierra Leone so that we all move forward. But with work in Sierra Leone, the mining sector, and then the EITI, I think we've made tremendous steps. The fact that we have very leading political will at the moment in driving the EITI process. We have done the Mines and Minerals Development Bill, which is awaiting Parliament. We also have the draft beneficial ownership policy. We have done a lot of work. And the revenues we have been talking about is still what we are asking government, so that we have generational funds start existing. Because even in the communities, the AITI tells us how much we are losing, how much companies are paying, the environmental fees and all. This week is the week of climate change. Yeah. And so we are looking at all of those costs that bear on our people in those communities. And so those are some of the things they are here for us to discuss. What's happening, how do we deal with this, and how to move forward. And then they should also help us understand what is working well in Ghana that is not working well. How do we share those experiences? There are things that are working well here, which
Buddy, now story you have to go slow.
Hey, buddy, I want to engage this weekend, so I go buy plenty new series in there they don't come out.
Hey, you still dey behind the encourage for you season fin there.
Hey, buddy, wait for do. Salon not the act season fin.
Who that tell you so? You know you're yet, but we all salon season fin more than call Purian.
Hey, buddy, I don't know part what you tell me so.
But you dey behind.
You know what? I don't forget the plate.
Then go to play on AYV TV every Fridays 8 p.m. on channel 33 and every Sundays 9 p.m. on channel 34.
But if Salon be active with him, one need for the white for his thing. I think it's high time man start to promote the whole salon season thing. You know what? It's late. I don't know.
Papa,
make it.
Go. Me family them. Charity begins at home. Una let we promote real local film then as salon. Watch out for Puri and TV series on AYV Television.
Inside this season film, you go no say Salon Sabi and then get for the show na in Salon Sabi TV. We na AYV Television every Friday on channel 33, 8 p.m. and every Sunday on channel 34, 9 p.m. So make you no left piano for waiting AYV films. Don't bring the salon.
All right, welcome back. We're sorry for that, technical inch, but we are back again. The show is this day on AYV Television on channel 33, 34 as well, and on our Facebook page, the Africa Young Voices Media Empire. And I still have in the studio my guests. They're here to discuss about how we should find ways to look at the economy around, more especially into the mining sector, and how we can able to benefit from there, and what have the gains made so far, and how we should able to do more in terms of getting things being done, more especially into the mining sector. And Madam Cecilia, you're actually on your legs when we have the technical inch.
Yeah, I was just saying that moving forward on the EITI process and into the sector, more specifically, how much government is losing out. They are here for us to discuss, especially at a point where on the EITI front, we are dealing with our validation. There are action points we are looking at which government needs to address at the moment. It has to be holistic from the company side, government, and then everybody. So they are here to see how they can help us in driving through those action points so that as a country we remain committed to our transparency and accountability processes.
And and someone might want to know, and what actions are needed to address, elite, finance flows in Sierra Leone, because that's also very important as well.
Yeah, one of the action points is the revenues that come from the mining sector. Normally we had the ratio where some percentage was going to government, to parliament, to councils and to paramount chiefs. We are seeing into the new law how that could benefit the community people themselves rather than those category of people. We also are asking government to have a separate ministry or body that should be looking at all of those revenues so that all revenues from the sector goes into one place, and then that oversight body or ministry make sure that they distribute evenly, rather than at the moment we don't have any fair sharing of the revenues that come from the mining sector. So those are some of the action points that we are looking into.
Okay. So let me come to it here from the policy angle, and in Africa, and not only in Sierra Leone but across where we have a large mining sector, and most often those who are supposed to benefit from what actually it's coming out from the mining sector have not been, and it's a challenge. And how can we see what the people supposed to benefit really reaches them? And if you watch in the places that in Africa that the mining sector is booming, that area you can see the development there. They are supposed to be there.
Thank you for having me. Yeah. Let me say that Africa as a continent recognizes minerals as a resource that we can leverage to ensure that the development of citizens is really pushed. So if you look across, there are quite a number of protocols that are geared towards optimizing and leveraging our mineral resources to push for this development objective. One of such is the Africa Mining Vision, and as part of the vision there are considerations for community development. So if you look at some of the frameworks, there's that push for community development agreement for countries to consider integrating community development agreement into the legal frameworks for the specific country. Now I see that is important because a lot of the times, like you mentioned, we have those mining companies, communities, suffering quite a number of impact from mineral resource exploitation. And so it is important that we mitigate some of these challenges that come to the communities. The EITI processes, like Cecilia mentioned, helps to address some of these issues having to do with subnational transfers, where revenues from that are received from mineral exploitation must be then channeled to the community level for development. But then you find that there are challenges around the management of the revenues and how those revenues are applied to develop, the lives of the community level actors. Now, if there are challenges, then the question is it a case of institutional capacity to manage those revenues, to apply those revenues for development? Is it a case of transparency for, monitoring the application of those revenues to make sure that those revenues are not siphoned into individual pockets? It's a combination of all of those things. So once, as actors in the space, we are able to push and advocate for, the right things to be done with reference to some of these issues, it's likely, we are most likely to see the objectives we are interested in being manifested in the lives of, the community level stakeholders, the stakeholders who are supposed to benefit from mineral resource exploitation. Like I said, the big objective is how do we use our mineral resources to develop the lives of citizens. That is the broad objective. Yeah. So the gaps in there, we push for strengthening institutional capacity, we push for transparency, we push for revenue disbursement to those levels, and then ensure that those revenues are managed and applied well to benefit the communities.
Okay, I know. So how can we be able to tackle that, and more especially in the area of corruption within that sector, and which I believe that is why the key players are actually coming together to chart the way forward in terms of getting a conclusion, to show or to ensure that people enjoy things that actually been done in their community.
I'm glad you mentioned corruption. So that is why the EITI framework is quite important, because it pushes for transparency, revenue reporting from the exploitation of mineral resources. And I'm happy to have learned that it's one area the government of Sierra Leone prioritizes, that is really taken serious, and the fact that it's even under the office of the vice president. So once we are able to prioritize the key actions under the EITI framework, the Sierra Leone EITI framework, we should be able to help with increasing transparency, monitoring of those resource revenues, such that issues about corruption and people getting the revenues for their own self-benefit, those issues can be addressed. EITI is one key approach we can look at when it comes to addressing issues of corruption and people benefiting from resource exploitation, individuals, rather than the broader society benefiting from the resource.
And Ben, it's quite a norm, or probably in terms of people just believe that because I'm there and I'm in charge of certain community, more especially into the mining sector, and you believe that whatever comes out of there, that place, you should put it in your pocket, and those who are supposed to enjoy that facility have not been having the opportunity to get it.
I think it's a major concern for resource governance watchers across the world. And much of the problem, and the reason why we keep emphasizing transparency, accountability, is because of the interest of individuals to see their own benefit ahead of what the ordinary Sierra Leonean or Ghanaian will be looking up to. And corruption is a major problem. And in fact, much of the problem that we have with illicit financial flow, lack of accountability and non-payment of the optimal resources to the state has to do with corruption. If you check our institutions and states, the states are the regulators. They manage the companies. They decide who should be in the room where the gold is refined. They decide who should be at the export point where the bauxite leaves or the iron ore leaves. All right. So over time, we keep talking about capacity. We keep talking about the ability of the state to actually monitor all these resources, and we keep saying that we don't have the capacity. So when are we going to have the capacity? We have instances where you have a revenue authority going to a company to audit, and he gets a call from the presidency or from the ministry to say, hold on, don't do it. All right. When that keeps happening, you're never going to have the capacity, because it is your duty. You are the regulator. You are the one to ensure that the cost that the company has declared is the actual cost. The people who are mandated to do that work, if they don't have the independence to be able to do that kind of work, we will keep talking about the capacity and it will never come. All right. So it is the corruption that creates that avenue for lack of performance in the state institutions that are mandated to actually protect the interests of the state. So we have to go beyond waiting for companies to report or waiting for the state to declare whatever they've got, to actually ensuring that these institutions, the accountability institutions that are supposed to function, actually function. If the police has to go into a company to investigate, they should have the free hands to do that without any minister interfering. If the revenue agency has to go into a company to do cost audit, they should have the free hands to go in there. The state has the power to audit companies, but in most cases, you would find a company going 4 or 5 years without being audited. So how do you establish the true cost of a production? So they tell you that 90% of the operations actually went into the cost of producing the raw material. I mean, how should you be stopped from auditing the company? To be sure, auditing doesn't necessarily mean that you are going there to find faults. You just want to be sure that whatever the company is saying is the truth. And even where is an error, a genuine error, it can still be identified by the state. So we need to have these institutions working and generating that confidence from within our own spaces, how production happens, how much cost is assigned to the activity. And that helps you to be able to optimize the resources. But unfortunately, we keep blaming ourselves, we keep touting a lack of capacity, but we are not allowing the capacity to actually be built. We are not allowing the institutions to practice what they know, for which they can keep correcting even if they are making mistakes, and learn from the processes and become much more capable of auditing the companies. The companies, they don't just come in, they don't come with military to come and take the resources away. We should just exercise the authority we have as the resource owners, be able to audit the cost and learn through that process how to effectively optimize this space. We're also talking about the revenues that are supposed to go to the community. That's another level of conversation that we need to have. We are pushing for more revenue, but what do we do with the revenue? How optimal are we utilizing the revenue that we get from the extraction of the resources? If a government contract will cost 2 million instead of the private sector, delivering the same thing for 1 million, then we have a problem. All right, how are contracts awarded from the revenues that we get? How efficient are the delivery of those contracts? You can have one government contract recycled year after year. We're pumping more money and the project never gets delivered. So you have cost overruns, budget overruns, inefficiencies. The quality of project delivery is a problem. So we have to start looking at all these dynamics to ensure that we are optimizing the revenue. It's not enough to get a revenue, but what you do with the revenue and how optimal the revenue benefit people. If you can't finish a project, a project that can be delivered in 6 months, 1 year, it delays for 2, 3, 4 years because there is no commitment to really ensure that it is delivered on time and on budget, then you're not optimizing the revenue. You're getting the money, but you're abusing it. So the same project is attracting cost overrun, interest payments, and we're not delivering it. So across the value chain, the important conversation we want to have is how much revenue are you getting? And when you get that revenue, how is it utilized? Is it efficiently disbursed? Is the procurement system strong enough to ensure that we can eliminate corruption and improve on efficiency? And that is the only way we can actually account for the resource that we are extracting. That is the only way we can ensure that we develop our countries. Don't let us use money for a 10-kilometer road when it can actually do 20, 30, 50 kilometers. All right. The efficiency of our spend has to be monitored by people in the space. We need to have a conversation with the media, with the politicians, with civil society organizations for us to play a central role in monitoring how expenditure happens across the value chain to ensure that when we extract the resources, we get a revenue, it feeds into development for the people to benefit. Otherwise, no matter how much revenue we get, it wouldn't yield to any substantial development outcomes for us.
And most African countries will tell you that and the economy is bad because we have not been exporting, more especially from the mining company. And you're thinking about what has been happened, when the mining sector was booming. Are we making, proper use of the revenue getting from these mining companies in order to ensure we're able to keep the economy running, whether or not the mining sector is moving or not, we can able to run the economy?
Absolutely. I mean, when you get revenue from the mineral sector, the concept around resource extraction has always been that it is cyclical, which means that the revenues tend not to be so predictable. So if you get a boom today, you might not have it tomorrow.
Yeah.
So the approach always has been, how do you ensure that you diversify your economy away from the extractive sector when you have the revenue? Be able to invest in your youth, invest in industry, invest in developing infrastructure that attracts investment, invest in the productive sectors or the rest sectors of your economy to be able to dampen the effect of the cyclicality of these mineral industry. That is what we have woefully failed to do. When we get the money, we quickly move it into if you like, populist expenditures, exhaust it quickly, and then the development is not done. And therefore, when you don't have the revenue, then you're struggling to run your budget. And that is what is happening to most resource-rich African countries. We are not diversifying. We are not investing in the productive sectors of our economies and always relying on resource sector to bring the revenue. And that is why, instead of pushing for how we can participate in the energy transition in the climate agenda, we are now worried about the impact of not selling our oil or selling our coal resources and how that drop in revenue could impact Africa's economies. So we have failed over time to invest in the critical areas, and that is coming to bite so hard. So the opportunity we have now, we can't squander it further. We need to really re-strategize to see how we can be very much optimal in the way we use revenue. We can be much more optimal in the way we build competency, skills, capacity of businesses to take up a wide spectrum of economic activity that diversifies the entire economy away from natural resources.
Okay, so let me come back to you, Madam Cecilia. I'm sure you want to speak about, what is the EITI, and the standards and how the country is going to benefit from being part of the entire process.
The EITI has evolved in Sierra Leone since 2007-8. I mean, we started like 2006, and standards have changed from 2013. We now have the 2016 standards, and I think Sierra Leone has been validated. We are on the compliance stage. Our next validation will be next year, and so we are working towards being compliant, and that's the more reason why we are having these conversations, because we are for now on the right path, and we want to continue being there rather than being delisted from the compliance status. So far, that's why I said with the action points that we need to put in place as a country. That's why we are here to discuss, so that we all engage government as civil society from Ghana, civil society from Sierra Leone. We all could engage our government to see how we all could move the process so that we remain compliant and we remain in the transparency and accountability mode moving forward. We are also trying to mainstream the EITI. We have done the processes, the research has begun, and we are having the draft report. Mainstreaming means we want to integrate EITI into the ministries, departments, and agencies. We don't want to continue with a situation where we'll continue having like the secretariat alone as EITI. We want every revenue generating MDA has a desk within it for EITI, so that we'll meet, we'll discuss, it will be validated. There's the Anti-Corruption Commission here, there is the Audit Service Report. When it's time, government now knows that this is the route to take, because we've implemented EITI for over 10 years. And so moving forward, it has to be part of government portfolio. And luckily, government is so keen on transparency and accountability that this could not be a delay, but to help us integrate it into the government machinery, functioning machinery, where we all look at it and see what is not working, what is working is what civil society and media should be looking at. I think once it's mainstream, our role as media and civil society is to monitor what is happening, so that we don't wait for them to give us their result. We should be giving them their report card. So instead of the secretariat, we will take the role, civil society and media, to be very interested in what's going on within the MDAs, like the Ministry of Mines, the NRA, the NMA, the Ministry of Finance. These are the revenue generating MDAs that will make up for the mainstreaming of AITI. So moving forward, AITI is coming to stay, and is going to stay with government, because as long as we talk about transparency and accountability, it has to be a must. But we are particularly interested in the subnational payments. What we mean by subnational payment, those royalties, those monies that are going down to the communities for community development, we are particularly interested. And that's where I think also the media and civil society is up to it. But the media across country, wherever we go, we try to involve the community media into the community development agreement, that's how we call it, working group. But then the media waits until we come back to them to talk to them about these processes. I think the media, too, whilst government is trying to mainstream, this is the time civil society is also mainstreaming it into their regular activities, and the media has to make some frantic efforts to start thinking about the community development agreements happening across the mining enclaves, mining communities, what is happening, how much is going, how much are people receiving, what are they doing with the money. Like Ben was saying, we have to track those revenues. And it is not only when we come to grant interviews to the media that they should be interested. And the media is part of the multi-stakeholder group of the AITI. You have SLAG representing. You had ASMIO, the Secretary General, and one other person who sits on the MSG. So I think SLAG should make this as one of the action points. I did not get that from the AGM, but part of this should be the action point moving forward. If we really want to talk about concrete AITI transparency and accountability issues, then let the media and civil society start knowing the flows of those revenues. Until we do that, it's government, whenever they need you, they call you, they give you information, you report, and come back. But when we start digging and getting to them, then they will now think that, no, this is business for us, it should be our work, and then we'll move forward.
Are citizens needed in sustaining EITI implementation?
Yeah, that's a sustainability plan that we've put in place, the mainstreaming. So whilst the multi-stakeholder group is looking at it, we as civil society has made that as part of our benchmark to see how we really monitor the mainstreaming patterns, what's going to happen. how much revenue is, and then how do we inform our community people? Because they are one of the people we exist for. Parliament, media, and civil society. We all play in the same constituencies with the same constituents, and we do like oversight roles. So I'm just urging the media, and probably AYV SABC should take a lead in knowing what is happening. Not only when we book appointments, you should be in fact calling us to say, we have noticed this is what is happening. So that, I mean, we start putting transparency on another platform rather than where it is at the moment.
Okay, so let me bring into you. I know we will continue to engage either the mining companies, the community people, the government, and even the stakeholders in these communities. But are there any other ways in terms of getting things done? Because I know this is not the first time, and it will not be the end, and it will continue. What should be done now in terms of getting things be fixed, more especially into the sector?
I mean, it will still be, continuing with what we have started, getting citizens involved in the process, getting companies to do what is right, and then getting the institutions, the state institutions, the regulators, and policymakers to act right when they have to. So, like my boss then mentioned, the issues about influencing state agencies and regulators not to act right. It's something we must look at if these issues need to be addressed, because there are numerous instances where people who are supposed to do the right things are influenced through various means to do, pursue their own interest rather than the interest of the state. So I think that, going forward, it's basically going to be strengthening our strategies, being more robust in our approach when it comes to that three-pronged approach where we work to ensure that citizens are involved, we work to ensure that companies act right when they have to, and then also work with regulatory agencies, and then there's the policymakers and state actors who matter in the whole chain of making policy decisions and then implementing them, act the way they are supposed to. Beyond these, I think that, there's also that bit of that political will which will be needed to drive the whole conversation and put that backing behind these actions that are required of stakeholders. Because, like you mentioned, if a regulator is, for instance, at a company conducting a cost audit, and then you get a call from the minister's office, you get a call from, some big political entity's office that you should stop what you are doing. For some reason, if you are not strong enough to pursue what you really believe in, you are likely to respond to their call and leave.
Yeah.
So that political will is really necessary to seeing the actions that require to be taken, to see them taken. And yes, we are still going to continue the conversations to make sure that, yes, there's that pressure on the political actors to also act right. Yeah.
Okay, and I know that there are a few comments on our Facebook page. We'll run quick them, but I think the one is very interesting or very important into the conversation. We'll embrace what George Tony is saying: a country with natural resources yet cannot manufacture its raw materials into finished goods, but only imports finished goods in a country that will never develop, especially, well, I think it's making case study of Sierra Leone and other African countries, which is very key, and this has been the concern for most people. Well, like for example in Sierra Leone, and I'm sure in Ghana, Nigeria, most of the West African countries, we have the raw materials, but us processing it in our own country for its citizens to benefit from it has been the challenge. And I think just recently, and I saw a release from the military leader in Guinea, is actually, ordering, that all mining, stuff should be done in Guinea. And this has been the policy, in all West African countries, but the implementation has also been the challenge. So how can we work around that in order to ensure we benefit from the materials that we have?
I mean, that's been the biggest conversation. We have mined in most cases for 50 years, 100 years, and we're still exporting raw materials. And that is because we've not consciously integrated the production processes and refining into the value chain. So we become raw material exporting countries. And we do know that once you get into that space of exporting the raw material, you're not going to employ too many people. You're not going to be able to align the other benefits to the industry. So in recent times, you would find that countries are beginning to come up with new laws of localization and policies that ensure that some elements of the production value chain can remain in countries. But the challenge again comes to how do you enforce those laws and aggressively implement the laws that we are actually setting up. We have many local content laws that are really not functioning. You have local content laws that are rather promoting laziness. So you have politicians setting up companies, and they want those companies to be the participants in the industry. So a government loses power, and all the businesses are also losing power. They can participate in the space because the new government wants their own companies to now align and participate. If you do that, you're not going to be able to build a capacity, because to be a mining company, it takes several years of building capacity, competency, raising money to be able to participate. If you become a service company and it can only last 4 or 5 years within a term of a political party, you can't become a strong company that allows you to participate aggressively. So we keep getting only foreign companies playing the key roles without building the local competency and capacity to be able to do that. You may instruct that it happens over time, but if we don't have the institutional discipline to allow these processes to evolve over time, we will come back talking about it year after year. And that is what has become our bane as Africa. We don't encourage our people to grow. We are only looking to identify them within the political circles and undermine their businesses. So local businesses are not flourishing unless you are a politician, unless you are aligned with a political party. So we have to go back to the drawing board and allow institutions to manage these processes, institutions that can be around for the long haul, to manage who gets developed. How do you integrate local manufacturing into the mining processes, and allow these local businesses to also grow over time, encourage them to become the multinationals that we have, without being tagged politically, only to be killed 4 or 5 years down the lane. So it's really about the actions. And the challenge we have is how do you get the politicians to seize that kind of interference, because that's where they also draw their power from. Right? They want to be at the center of the events that are happening in every space and decide who participates where and who acts where. But those are not nation-building tactics. They only undermine the state ultimately, because if you kill a local business, you have killed other employees who are aligned to his businesses also, right? So it's a bigger conversation about building systems that work and growing those systems over time for us to be. It wouldn't happen as an event. So the strategy should also look into the future and long term to see how we build on block after block gradually until we can build an industry that actually process the raw material that we produce in our context.
Okay, and there are a few comments also on our Facebook page. Kodzo is saying we have an advantage in critical minerals for the energy transition, but if we treat them the way we have done, the precious minerals will still be the losers from the transition. And also Jabati Mambo is saying, as long as we have bilateral agreement with the West, Africa will never stop exporting raw materials to the West. Did you subscribe to that?
Yeah, I think the first point about the critical minerals is really important.
Yeah.
I mean, Africa is still endowed with a lot of resources. The resources that we need: aluminium, bauxite, lithium, cobalt. These are the minerals that are required for the production of batteries, silica sand for the production of silicon for the solar panels. We have these resources. The concern really is, how do you integrate these resources into the conversation around energy transition? All right. If we don't have that kind of conversation now, to see how that creates opportunity for us, it becomes the next income generating venture for our countries. You sit there and foreign companies will encumber all these resources. We'll give it to them as concessions, and they will still export them raw and send us batteries, send us panels, and we'll keep using it. So it's a conversation we need to have about how we integrate that into our approach to energy transition, so that if you have lithium deposit, you're not just signing it off like you did with your gold and your bauxite and your iron ore in the past, but you want to integrate that into local production processes. Can we refine here? Can we start encouraging our universities to get into research to produce the batteries locally over the period of time, for us to also embrace the broader economic prospects that comes with the energy transition. So those are the big ticket conversations we need to have going forward. And like I said, nobody should think that within 5 years we're able to do all of this. And that has been a problem with our politicians. They want what they can get within 5 years, within 4 years of their term. And if you do that, you're going to think short term, and you're not going to be able to build the systems that help the country to survive for a longer period of time. It comes back to building the institutions, allowing institutions to run these processes and make it much more sustainable long term. So that 50, 40 years down the line, we would have said that when the energy transition was beckoning, we were able to align our mineral resources to it, and not allow for another exportation of raw material to other productive economies. So there's a whole new thinking that we have to embrace, a new thinking that we have to embrace to ensure that we can look into the long-term future.
Okay, so let me come back to Madam Cecilia. We're trying to round up now. So I know there are a lot of policy and strive been made in Sierra Leone in terms of how we should be able to strengthen the mining policy, the sector, ensure that it actually gives hope to the people, more especially development as well. With the conference tomorrow and next tomorrow, what we should be expecting, and in terms of getting things done in order to ensure we set the target, we're able to implement it, and at the end, those who are supposed to benefit from it, the citizens, they have the opportunity.
Tomorrow is not the end to its means. Tomorrow we want to continue the dialogue. We want to continue talking about Sierra Leone, what we want to see with our minerals. How do we want to get it? If we are not getting it right, what do we do to get it right? How do we start the conversation with our government to see how they can also understand? Because the people working in the ministries, in the MDAs, are the people who are putting these figures together. They are also the people who are receiving the funds, whether through checks or whatever. So we want to sit down with them to see how we look back at what has been happening. If it's not happening right, how do we chart a new way forward for us to see how we can deal with those issues that are building blocks for us. So, the discussion tomorrow will be continuous, but we want to reflect on what we have done and how do we move forward.
Okay. And Theo, I know, and it's a conference that actually it's experience sharing here. what is quite lacking here in Sierra Leone and also in Ghana, and how you guys have actually worked in terms of fixing few things, and also the strive made in Sierra Leone in terms of getting things right. You guys are going to put together, and we have one voice in terms of getting things done. So what we should be expecting, sorry, from your part, you know, and with the experience, you know, in getting into the sector from Ghana?
I think that for us, I mean, we've been doing quite a lot when it comes to the extractive and then the energy sector, not just in Ghana, but with experiences from countries such as Sudan and Nigeria, Liberia. You have, you know, that experience. So, like you rightly mentioned, we are going to share experiences from some of these countries. And also learn from the experiences of Sierra Leone, look at how best we can collaborate to ensure that some of these challenges that continue to plague our economies are addressed, but also to add a bit to the comment that someone said having to do with until we stop bilateral agreement with the West, we may continue exporting raw materials. I think that is why we need to take, as a continent, we need to take the Africa Continental Free Trade Area quite serious, where we look at creating a single market for trading amongst ourselves, and then creating a single market that is quite huge for, you know, as a power within the global economy. So if that arrangement is really taken seriously, a country like Sierra Leone, that has a lot of iron deposits. An investor may be interested in, you know, because of the ready market on the continent, may be interested in investing in processing that iron ore into steel for construction and all of those. So it's one critical area we need to look at, making sure that the AFTA works for us and then works for us quite well. Yeah.
Okay, and Bean, so what should we be expecting now generally, and I'm sure that will be your parting shot as we go, and I know there are more conversation, you know, with regards to a lot of things which will be coming up, and you know, with experience, it's from expertise, people sharing their experience, get things done. I know this is about how we should plan the future, you know, in us getting what we should be doing in our various countries.
No, I think it's part of a series of conversations that we want to have across the region. In the next 3 days, we're here to engage the media, civil society, the state institutions, to ensure that all of us can embrace the change. Right? We can begin to look at what is sustainable for resource extraction and how development should happen in that space. So, I mean, we are open to learn and also share what we know in resource governance with stakeholders in the coming days. And hopefully we should find a way around resource governance and how we can optimize our interest as resource owners into the future. And that is fundamental for us, because if you look at Africa's development, not many continents are lucky to have the resources we have.
Yeah.
And therefore, it's urgent that we position ourselves to integrate the free gift from nature into our development processes. And that's how we can, you know, accelerate our development, optimizing our resources. There are many countries that have developed without natural resources. We have it, and therefore that should be an added advantage and not a curse on us. And therefore we need to have that conversation together, look at where we need to start afresh, where we need to strengthen, and how quickly we can turn around these problems for the benefit of our people.
Okay.
Because we have the resources. All it requires is effective governance of the resources that we do have. And that is the kind of conversation we want to have in the next 3 days.
Okay, so Madam Cecilia, what will be your parting shot, you know, with your experience around the EITI, and you know, and what should we be doing and get things right for Africa as well?
With the mining sector, I think we need to have the regional discussion and see how we improve on it for Sierra Leone. We are particularly interested also with the communities. because we have over the years looked at mining communities vis-a-vis non-mining communities. Take like rutile, Sierra Rutile and my 91.
Yeah.
If you get to my 91, it's much more improved than Sierra Rutile, which is bringing in the funds. So those are the things we are drawing the attention of government. It's by no mistake, let mining communities benefit from all of the problems that are created by mining. And so moving forward, it's not only about revenues, it's about development in those communities. And we think our government will engage our government further, will continue talking to them so that we all see how we work together to improve the mining sector and development from that sector to the country in general.
Okay, and Theo?
Yeah, maybe as a closing remark, I'll just say that people need to be interested in the conversation because we need everyone on board to get people to act. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen and lady, Madam Cecilia Theo Bean, for being part of the show. And I'm sure it's a conversation continue because it's very important to create that awareness raising, you know, more especially people to understand and the authorities, you know, to know what should be done in getting things being fixed. We'll follow up on the conference, you know, and I'm sure some of the agreements you guys are going to make in terms of how we should be able to ensure that, you know, the resources, you know, go to those who are supposed to benefit from it, and how government can be able to manage resources coming from the mining sector and our minerals as well. We should be able to manage it. So thank you very much for being part of the show. And this is where we end this edition of Unis and Current Affairs show this day. And I've been your presenter, David M. We'll see. Many thanks to the production team and technical team. Till tomorrow for another edition of This Day. Do have a lovely day and bye for now. Good afternoon and welcome to This Day for the live on AYV TV on the channel.
You're watching AYV Television.